Vince Dunn of the St. Louis Blues has signed a new contract. We have some updates on the Boston Bruins and some NHL trade rumors focusing on the Pittsburgh Penguins and the Columbus Blue Jackets. Could unsigned RFA Pierre Luc Dubois actually be looking for a change of scenery? We'll discuss all that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, we have a variety of news topics to cover here today. The first one would be the signing of Vince Dunn by the St. Louis Blues. They get their RFA defenseman under contract ahead of training camp. Now their job is done when it comes to looking after all of that. The only real question mark in the Blues situation now would be to sign Mike Hoffman to a contract, which he's going on PTO, which I would suspect on day 1 or 2 of camp. He will be signed once they can officially place some of these guys on long-term injury reserve. That's just going to be a matter of a formality. It's rumored he's going to get somewhere around $4.5 million. But Vince Dunn signs for a 1-year contract at $1.875 million. He will still be a restricted free agent next year again, but he will now have arbitration rights, so that obviously this won't drag out so long next time, because I can go to arbitration and get the deal settled. So I think that's a pretty fair deal. Obviously, with the departure of former captain Alex Pietrangelo, Dunn and other guys like Perico, etc., will be able to move up and kind of take on an even bigger role. Obviously, Dunn is a big part of the future of the blue line, given his talent and his age. Obviously, younger than a lot of the guys there. So nice to see them get that deal done. I think it's a pretty fair contract, and we'll see where things go. Now, an update on another contract front would be Matthew Barzal and the New York Islanders. There's still reports that they're not really all that close to getting a deal done. I've seen some rumblings about a 3-year deal around $6 million per season. I don't know if that's going to get it done or not. I guess we'll have to wait and see if there's any truth to that number for what's being reported out there. But I know Barzal apparently is in the Long Island area and is ready to go for training camp, assuming that he can get a deal done and ahead of camp here, which is only a few days away. Now, of course, today is New Year's Eve, December the 31st, so for the 7 teams who did not participate in the 2020 Return to Play playoffs this past summer, their training camp opens today. So many of them are already on the ice and already getting some drills on their way here, so obviously that's great to see for many of those franchises to get back out there and get things rolling. So obviously that's good. So we'll see what happens here once we get the other camps going. There should be lots of rumblings about who's going to make the teams, the possible changes they might make. So there could be still a fair bit of news and rumors around what these teams are going to be doing here in the next couple of weeks ahead of the season getting started. Now, an update on the Boston Bruins situation. Of course, as we know, yesterday we reported that the longtime captain Zdeno Chara has left town and signed with the Washington Capitals on a pretty cheap 1-year contract. I know I've seen a pretty good mix of reactions from the Bruins fan base yesterday on social media. Some were quite upset over it. Obviously, many were attached to Chara for a long time. Obviously he was there a long time, was a big part of that team, big part of the culture change and helping them be a lot more successful after he arrived. But there's one thing that we kind of found a little odd was that he put out on his Instagram farewell, I guess you could say, to the Bruins fan base that the Bruins had informed him they were going in a different direction. So he was able to move on and go play somewhere else. But comments today from Don Sweeney, the GM of the Bruins, indicates that a while back, as I said earlier in the offseason, that they actually did make a contract offer to Chara. But I honestly think what the problem here is not so much about the money. I think it's about the role that he was given. I think basically he was told with the contract that he may have been offered would be that he was going to be a part-time defenseman who wasn't necessarily going to be playing every day, and that they wanted to give their younger defensemen like Vakanainen and Lauzon and Zboril more of an opportunity. I mean, those three combined only have like 40 NHL games experience, and it's hard to see what they have until they get a chance to play more. So I understand from their perspective there, but at the same time, you got to treat your captain who's been there a long time, with respect. And I know some people felt like he was disrespected by not really being offered more of a reliable role. But then there's some of the fan base that feel differently, that it was time to move on. But regardless of where you put yourself in that situation or what your stance is on whether it was time for him to go or not, one thing is certain, I did make comments that they will be naming a new captain. I think it's pretty obvious it's going to be Patrice Bergeron. I don't think that's something they really need to give a second thought to, but Don Sweeney wasn't going to make any kind of announcements today. He basically made it known that they want to take a little bit of time and breathe, is what he said, and kind of evaluate the situation. But I would assume that either by the time training camp opens or at the very least before the season actually gets underway, Bergeron will have the C on his jersey. I'm not sure who will get his A. Like I said yesterday, it could go to like a guy like Marchand, or they might even decide to put it on a younger guy too, like a McAvoy or somebody. Hard to say exactly how they do that, but either way, Bergeron will be the next captain of the Boston Bruins. So it's just a matter of making that official here sometime in the near future. But it's interesting to see the discrepancy here between what the Bruins are saying and what Big Z is saying. Obviously, they kind of have a little bit of a different story, but that's not to be too surprising. A lot of times we've seen players leave town, and basically teams want to come out and say, "Oh well, we tried, we made an offer, and he didn't take it." But sometimes they make offers knowing that they won't take it. Just, I guess that's their way of trying to be respectful. That's where they're trying to be polite and trying to smooth things over. I mean, there were reports that the Bruins were hoping he would choose retirement and stay with them and maybe work in some kind of a different capacity, maybe as some kind of a development coach or something to that effect. I'm not sure exactly what role they had in mind for him, but I can see him, obviously with all those years of experience, being somebody who can get into that here in the short term. But at the end of the day, I think the Bruins were ready to move on, and I think that was pretty apparent through most of the offseason here. It wasn't going to work. He wanted to play, which was also pretty clear. And if he wanted to play and play every day and be a regular role, then that wasn't going to work out with what the Bruins had in mind. So they had a difference of philosophy there, and it just did not work out to keep that relationship going. Now, as I mentioned as well, we have a couple of teams that are kind of linked here in the trade rumor mill. Obviously, one would be the Pittsburgh Penguins. I don't expect a ton of activity out of GM Jim Rutherford here anytime soon, but there have been rumblings over the past probably 3 to 4 weeks that the Penguins are a team that would like to add to their depth and kind of maybe reassess what they have in their forward group especially. But at this point, given the market where it's at, camps are starting to open. There's not much out there in the free agent market that would probably satisfy any potential upgrades for them. So I think they're probably going to sit tight. But as we know, Jim Rutherford is not a very patient man. If things do not start well for the Penguins, I can see a trade happening pretty quick. I personally think the main areas of the team that they really need to evaluate will be the bottom 6, and I think within the top 6 as well, they have to evaluate how well Kasperi Kapanen is going to fit in. They paid a pretty price to the Maple Leafs to acquire him. I think the intention is to start him on the top line with Crosby, and I guess we will see how that works out now. It has potential to work out real well. I mean, he's proven in the past when he has a chance to play with the top players that he can fit in and be a great supporting character there and put up some good points. So if everything works in that regard, then they'll probably remain focused on seeing if they can upgrade the bottom 6 if they feel that they need to do that. If not, if Kapanen's not really working out, though, because I think he's the main question mark. I mean, you look around like Crosby, Malkin, Zucker, Gensel, like Russ, like those are guys that I think you have a little bit more reliability on. They're a little bit more of a proven commodity, whereas Kapanen has proven things in the past, but only for short-term stretches, because then his role with the Leafs was kind of up and down depending on where he was at in the lineup. And if he proves to be a solid addition like they're hoping he is, great. But if it's not quite working out, they could take a different approach here, maybe swing for a bigger fit, and maybe try to acquire a top 6 winger and move him down the lineup. And difficult to say how they would maneuver things, because they don't have a ton of cap space. So if they're going to make a bigger acquisition, then something of more value will have to go out the other way. But if they want to make some minor tweakings, then they won't have as many issues doing that. So we'll have to wait and see how Rutherford does things, but I think he wants to assess what he has through the training camp process and get at least a few games under their belt. But in a 59-game season with a short and condensed schedule, I don't think that the Penguins are going to be a team that's going to be patient. If things don't start well, I think you're going to see Rutherford be very active early on. Based on his history, I think that's what we're likely going to see. Now, another big nugget here of rumors came out of Pierre Luc Dubois from TSN The Athletic today, talking about Columbus Blue Jackets unsigned RFA centerman Pierre Luc Dubois. Now, this is kind of a little bit of a conflicting report, because I've seen reports before that he was in Columbus, but LeBrun is saying that he is not in Columbus. So I'm not sure what is accurate here. I personally have no idea where Dubois is, but I've seen different reports now. But today, LeBrun says that Dubois is not in Columbus and that he is not likely going to go to camp, obviously without a contract, which is something that players don't tend to do. They don't want to take the chance of getting hurt or doing anything if they're not signed, which makes a lot of sense, clearly. But obviously he kind of wonders as well. But he put the nugget out there that he's hearing rumblings from other NHL executives that Dubois might want a change of scenery. So that's the first we've heard of that. I mean, we've heard comments from Jackets GM Jarmo Kekalainen throughout the offseason saying he wasn't too concerned about it, that he would get it done. Obviously, we've seen other players like Werenski, for example, get signed as camp is starting up or are in the early stages of training camp, that he wasn't concerned. He would get the deal done, and Dubois would be a big part of their future like they anticipated. But as far as change of scenery goes, this is new information that we have not heard before. So you'd have to think if a player like that comes available, like you probably saw on the thumbnail, I had some logos of some teams that they're just teams that I think would be trying to pounce all over that if that was indeed the case. I can't say with any certainty that the Jackets are having trade discussions with any other teams. They're just teams I felt would be wise to make the call and get the negotiation started if that was indeed going to be an accurate and true statement that Dubois could be shopped because they're teams that would have the necessary assets to make a deal done. Like, for example, look at Winnipeg. I mean, geez, there's already been rumors that the Jackets were considering moving a guy like David Savard. I mean, if they were ever going to do a line deal, maybe the Jackets, who are heavily interested in that, maybe they get a guy like Dubois in a defenseman, throw in something else. Like, they would have the necessary parts. Now, of course, having line but not that top center to play with, that might not be the greatest, but still, like, it's an interesting concept. And when it comes to the Jets, though, like, they desperately need that other centerman. If they can move Stastny down to the number 3 center and have a guy like Dubois play with Scheifele 1-2 down the middle for the next number of years, I mean, that would be absolutely huge for Winnipeg. Add in an experienced blue liner like a Savard or something like that, that would be a good haul. I don't know exactly how many pieces, obviously, that they would want for line A. That's just a starting point. And that's just, like I said, that's just a guess on my part because we know they've had talks before, and we know that even though they acquired Paul Stastny, I don't think he's a long-term number 2 option for Winnipeg in the center position. So getting a guy like Dubois would be a major upgrade. Look at a team like Ottawa, for example. They've added a bunch of veterans. They have a ton of prospect currency, I guess you could say, when it comes to picks and players. So they're not all going to be long-term Ottawa Senators. Like, they could put a good package together to intrigue Kekalainen if he was going to have to make a deal. As we know, as they have a trade history, those two teams have made several deals a few years back when it comes to Duchesne and Dzingel, etc. So, really, I think those are some prime teams that would be picking up the phone. I'm sure they're not the only ones. When a young center like that, if he were to become available and it's widely known, a lot of teams would be interested because he would be an upgrade. For some teams as a 1C, and for many teams as a 2C for sure. I mean, we saw what he did in the playoffs in the bubble this past summer. It was a bit of a coming out party for him, especially against the Leafs. Like, it was he proved how good he can be. So if the Jackets need to get this guy signed and be a big part of the future, I mean, they're already a team that needs more offense. They're not really going to be able to get better by making that kind of trade. It's going to be a really tough trade to win. But if the rumblings that up Pierre LeBrun today have any truth to them at all, that Dubois might want a change of scenery, then you're going to see a lot of interest, and it could be making for a very interesting bit of topic here to talk about for the next little while. But be curious to see if he does get signed or if a trade is indeed going to take place. So we'll see what happens here, but it's certainly a story we'll be following for the next little while. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments, and we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content. And give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.